Welcome to Monk's Temple. Find a place of comfort. Perhaps you are seated, or lying down in the quiet of your own space. Wherever you are, let the weight of the day begin to settle. Let your attention soften, and arrive here, in this moment, with these words. We are not beginning a journey to a distant land, but turning gently inward, to explore the landscape that is already here. Tonight, we are not seeking to acquire anything. We are practicing the gentle art of letting things be. Let me share a memory with you. Early in my time at the temple, I was given the simple, repetitive task of raking the gravel in the courtyard. The pattern was precise, long, deliberate strokes to create lines of perfect harmony. For weeks, I raked with a tightness in my chest. My mind was not on the gravel, but on the result. Was the line straight? Was the pattern correct? Would the master approve? I was not raking. I was performing, and I was exhausted by it. One afternoon, a sudden breeze scattered a pile of leaves I had just gathered. A wave of frustration rose in me. But as I watched, the leaves danced and skittered, making their own chaotic, beautiful patterns across my perfect lines. And in that moment, I saw the folly. I had been fighting the wind, fighting the leaves, fighting the natural disorder of the world to create a temporary, fragile order. The teaching was not in the perfect lines, but in my reaction to the wind. The peace came not from controlling the courtyard, but from seeing that the courtyard included both the rake and the scattering breeze. If this idea of finding peace not in control, but in a deeper kind of seeing, speaks to you, I invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. Here, we explore these quiet truths together. We often believe that peace is a structure we must build, a state we must achieve when conditions are just right. We imagine it as a still pond, and we spend our lives trying to calm the water by pressing down on the waves with our own hands. The effort is immense, and the moment we lift our hands, the ripples return. Buddhism offers a different understanding. Peace is not the absence of waves. Peace is the depth of the ocean that remains undisturbed, far below the surface turmoil. Your mind has that depth. We have just forgotten how to sink below the churning surface. This forgetting begins with a simple, instinctive move, resistance. When an uncomfortable feeling arises, a knot of anxiety, a hollow of sadness, a buzz of irritation, our first impulse is to push it away. We treat it like an intruder in the house of our mind. We tense. We argue. We distract. We try to think our way out of it. This resistance is like adding fuel to a fire. The feeling itself might be a small, natural flame, but our resistance is the bellows that fans it into a blaze. The Buddha's insight was profound. Suffering is not the first spark of pain, it is the wind of our own rejection that makes it burn out of control. I once met a woman who described her anxiety as a monster in the basement. She spent her days trying to keep the basement door locked, listening fearfully for any sound from below. Her entire life was organized around containment. The anxiety, of course, only grew more powerful in the dark. The practice she began was not about slaying the monster. It was, with immense courage, about walking down the basement stairs, turning on the light, and looking. What she found, when she stopped resisting and started observing, was not a monster, but a lost, frightened part of herself, trembling in the corner. The moment she saw it clearly, without the filter of her terror, the monster began to shrink. It didn't vanish, but it was no longer in charge. She had stopped feeding it with her fear. This is the pivot. From resistance to observation. From war to curiosity. It begins with a question not of, how do I get rid of this, but, what is this, actually? You bring the light of awareness to the feeling itself. Where do you feel it in the body? Is it tight or heavy? Is it moving or static? Does it have a color, a temperature? This is not a clinical analysis. It is a gentle turning towards, like turning your face to feel the full complexity of a breeze. In that turning, a space opens up. You are no longer fused with the anxiety, you are aware of the anxiety. There is a difference, and that difference is where your freedom lives. Let's talk about what we're really holding on to. We speak of emotions as things we have, as possessions. I have anxiety. I have sadness. This language is subtle, but it shapes everything. It makes the feeling into a permanent object in our inner room, something we must carry. Buddhism invites a linguistic, and therefore perceptual, shift. Instead of, I am sad, try, sadness is present. Instead of, I am anxious, notice, anxiety is here. This isn't wordplay. It is the first step in realizing you are not the weather, you are the sky that holds it. Imagine you are a vast, open plain. The wind sweeps across you, sometimes a gentle caress, sometimes a punishing gale. You do not say, I am the wind. You feel the wind. You allow it to move through you, over you, around you. But the plain remains, grounded, vast, unchanged in its essential nature. Your thoughts and feelings are that wind. They are events that happen upon the terrain of your awareness, not the terrain itself. When you say, I am angry, you are confusing the plain with a storm passing over it. You shrink from the vastness into the temporary, turbulent event. The suffering is in that shrinking, that misidentification. This is the heart of emotional non-attachment, a core tenet of the Buddha's path. Non-attachment is not coldness, not indifference. It is the opposite. It is the capacity to feel fully without being capsized. It is to let the wind of joy blow without desperately building a shelter to keep it there. It is to let the wind of sorrow blow without digging a hole to hide from it. It is to remain the plain, open and receptive to all weather, knowing that no wind lasts forever. I remember a fisherman I knew who lived by a great, unpredictable lake. Some days, the water was like glass, and his nets came up full with a silver harvest. Other days, storms would rage, and he would return with empty nets, soaked and weary. I asked him once if he preferred the calm days. He looked at me, puzzled. The lake is the lake, he said. The calm is the lake. The storm is the lake. My job is not to prefer one face of the lake over another. My job is to read the water, to respect its mood, and to mend my nets in the quiet times. He had a deep, unshakable peace about him. He was not attached to abundance, nor was he devastated by lack. He was in relationship with the whole nature of the lake. His contentment came from that fundamental acceptance, not from the day's catch. We are so often like a sailor who only accepts the calm and curses the storm, forgetting that both are the nature of the sea upon which we have chosen to sail. Our life is that sea. To demand only calm is to reject the very medium of our existence. The Buddha's teaching on non-attachment is an invitation to become that wise fisherman, to learn the rhythms, to respect all moods, and to find our steadiness not in the condition of the water, but in the depth of our own boat. This brings us to a powerful, and often misunderstood, word, desire. We are told that desire is the root of suffering. This can sound bleak, as if we are to extinguish all longing, all passion, all care. But that is not it. The Buddha was a master observer of cause and effect. He saw that suffering arises not from desire itself, but from the clinging to desire, from the mental fist that closes around a wanted outcome and will not open, come what may. It is the difference between appreciating a beautiful sunset and suffering because you cannot stop the sun from setting. The suffering isn't in the setting of the sun, it is in your demand that it stay. Our most subtle and powerful clinging is not to objects, but to states of being. We cling to the desire to feel happy, secure, and certain. We make a secret contract with the universe: I will be okay only when I feel this specific way. This contract is the source of our fragility. It hands the keys to our inner peace to the ever-changing, uncontrollable world. Let me tell you about a gardener I met at a monastery. He tended the roses with exquisite care. He showed me a particular bush, his favorite, that was in full, glorious bloom. Next week, he said, not with sadness but with simple fact, these petals will be on the ground, and it will be a different kind of beautiful. He did not cling to the bloom. He loved it precisely because he understood its nature was to bloom and to fade. His joy was in the participation in the cycle, not in the freezing of one stage. His happiness was not diminished by impermanence, it was framed by it, and therefore made rich and poignant. He was free to love the rose completely because he was not asking it to be something it could not be, permanent. We are all tending our own inner garden. We have blooms of joy and buds of potential, but we also have fallow ground, fallen leaves, and periods of winter dormancy. Clinging is trying to be in perpetual, dazzling bloom. It is exhausting, and it is a war against nature. Non-attachment is the wisdom of the gardener who tends to each phase with equal care, knowing the fallen leaf nourishes the soil for the next bloom. Your winter of sadness is not a dead garden. It is a necessary, quiet, restorative phase. When you stop demanding blossoms in December, the peace of the frost itself can be felt. Let's examine the space between what happens and how we meet it. There is an old story, not from the scriptures but from the oral tradition, of a villager who came to the Buddha in great distress. His crop had failed, his barn had burned, and his son had left home. "I am ruined," the man wept. "So much pain has fallen upon me." The Buddha listened quietly and then asked, "Did the pain fall upon you, or did you fall upon the pain?" The man was confused. The Buddha continued, "The fire burned the barn. That is an event. The son walked away. That is an event. Your belief that you are ruined, that is where you have fallen, with your full weight, upon the events. You have landed in the center of the pain and declared it your home. This is a radical teaching. Much of our suffering is not in the event, but in the nesting we do inside the event. We don't just experience loss, we move into the house of loss, furnish it with memories of what was, and wallpaper it with fears of what will never be. We become the caretaker of a museum of pain. Buddhism asks us to consider a different relationship, to be a witness to the passing weather, not a permanent resident of the storm. Think of your mind as a clear, still mirror. Life passes before it. A joyful moment reflects as joy. A sad moment reflects as sadness. The mirror does not cling to the image of joy, staining itself with gold. It does not reject the image of sorrow, cracking itself in protest. It simply reflects, perfectly and impartially, what is before it. Then the moment passes, and the mirror is clear again, ready for the next reflection. Our suffering arises because we are not like the mirror. We see the reflection of joy and try to glue it to the glass. We see sorrow and try to smash the mirror to avoid the image. We confuse the reflection for the substance of the glass itself. The practice is to polish the mirror of awareness so that it can reflect fully, without distortion or attachment, knowing that no reflection is permanent. A personal story comes to mind. For many years, I had a recurring dream of losing a precious, ancient book. In the dream, I would search frantically through endless, shifting corridors, my heart pounding with desperation. I would wake feeling anxious and drained. I spoke to my teacher about it. He didn't interpret the symbol of the book. Instead, he said, "Tonight, in the dream, when you feel the panic rise, see if you can stop running. Sit down in the corridor. Feel the floor beneath you. And simply say, 'Here is panic.' See what happens." That night, the dream came. As the familiar frantic search began, I remembered. With dream effort, I stopped. I sat down on the cold stone floor of the dream corridor. I felt the panic like an electric buzz in my chest. I whispered, internally, "Here is panic." I didn't fight it. I just sat with it. And a remarkable shift occurred. The endless corridors dissolved. I was simply in a small, quiet room. The precious book was on a table, open. I hadn't needed to find it, I had needed to stop running from the feeling of loss. The moment I stopped resisting the panic, the dreamscape transformed. The lesson was profound. The object of my search was often hidden not in a place, but behind the curtain of my own resistance to an uncomfortable feeling. This is the transformative power of what we might call allowing. Allowing is not passive resignation. It is an active, courageous state of non-interference. It is the decision not to add another layer of commentary, judgment, or struggle onto the raw experience of this moment. If sadness is here, you allow it to be sad. You don't tell it to be hopeful. If anxiety is here, you allow it to be anxious. You don't command it to be calm. You create a space of hospitality for even the most difficult guests. And in that space, something alchemical often occurs. The guest, feeling truly seen and not fought, often finishes its visit more quickly. We fear that if we allow a dark feeling, it will swallow us whole. But a feeling is not a predator. It is more like a wave. When you tense up and try to stand rigid against a wave, it will knock you down and drag you under. But if you relax, dive into it, or float over it, you move with its energy. You discover that on the other side of the wave is calm water. The wave's power was only destructive to the degree that you resisted its nature. Your sadness, your fear, your anger. These are emotional waves. Resistance is bracing against them. Allowing is learning to swim, to float, to understand their rhythm. Consider a young child learning to walk. She stumbles and falls, bumping her knee. For a moment, there is shock, then a deep, sincere cry. She feels the pain fully. She does not think, "I shouldn't cry," or "This means I'm a bad walker." She simply expresses the sensation. A loving parent comforts her, and soon, the wave of pain and upset passes. She gets up and tries again, the incident already fading. Her process is pure, sensation, expression, release, movement. As adults, we interrupt this natural cycle. We stumble, we experience a failure, a rejection. We feel the pain. But before we can even cry, our mind rushes in, this is terrible. What does this say about me? I should have known better. Now everything is ruined. We get stuck in the mental commentary, the story about the pain. We never allow the pure sensation to complete its arc. The pain gets trapped, and becomes a sore spot we carry, a story we rehearse. The Buddha's path is, in part, a return to that childlike wholeness of experience, to feel what is here, completely, without the added and unnecessary narrative of what it means about our eternal self. We carry a silent assumption that burdens every moment, the belief that our thoughts are truth. We think, therefore it is real. A thought arises. I am not good enough, this situation is a catastrophe, I will always feel this way, and we bow to it as if it were a decree from the universe. We build our emotional reality on these shifting, insubstantial whispers. Buddhism invites us to question this sovereignty. Thoughts are not facts, they are events in the mind, like clouds in the sky or sounds in a room. They appear, they have a certain shape, and they dissolve. To suffer because of a thought is to suffer because of a cloud's passing shadow. There is a practice sometimes called thought labeling. It is simple but profound. When a thought arises, especially a painful or persistent one, you gently note its category, as if you were a librarian quietly shelving a book. Ah, a worry thought. Here is a planning thought. This is a memory thought. You do not argue with the thought's content. You do not follow its storyline to the dreaded conclusion. You simply acknowledge its type and return your attention to your breath or the sensations in your body. This creates a critical distance. You are no longer lost in the thought, you are aware of the thought. The thought loses its hypnotic power. You see it as a mental object, not as a command. I learned this not in formal meditation, but from watching an old clockmaker in the village near the temple. His shop was cluttered with the innards of timepieces. Gears, springs, pendulums all in various states of assembly. He would work with a magnifying glass clamped to his eye. I asked him once how he kept track of all the tiny, similar pieces. He smiled and said, I don't follow the tick. I watch the mechanism. He explained that a customer would come in distressed, my clock is too fast. My life is running away, or my clock has stopped. Time is standing still. But he didn't listen to their story about time. He would open the back and look at the mechanism. A bit of dust on a gear. A spring slightly out of true. He fixed the mechanism, not the customer's story about time. Our thoughts are the noisy, often inaccurate, tick-tock our mind generates. The underlying mechanism is the flow of awareness itself. When we suffer, we are usually arguing with the tick-tock, not understanding the mechanism. The practice of mindfulness is learning to open the back of the clock and see the clear space in which all the gears turn. This relates directly to one of the most liberating insights on the path, the understanding of impermanence, or anicca. We know intellectually that all things change. But we live as if the painful thing will last forever and the pleasant thing should last forever. We are in a constant, low-grade war with the fundamental law of the universe. To truly internalize impermanence is to be freed from the prison of the present moment, whether that moment is glorious or agonizing. It is to know, in your bones, that this too shall pass. This is not a cold comfort, it is the ultimate comfort. It means no darkness is final. It also means no peak experience is the summit of your life. It allows you to hold all experience lightly. I remember a devastating storm that hit the temple grounds. An ancient oak tree, under which 100 generations had meditated, was split in two by lightning. There was a palpable grief among the residents. It felt like the loss of a wise elder. For days, we walked by the shattered trunk in silence. Then, one morning, the head gardener gathered us. He didn't speak of loss. He pointed to the crevice in the broken trunk, where rain had collected. "Look," he said. Already, tiny green fronds of fern were unfurling from the wet, blackened wood. "The tree is becoming a garden," he said softly. He then assigned us to carefully transplant the fragments of healthy wood and nurture the new ferns. The lesson was not about positive thinking. It was a direct demonstration of impermanence in action. The form of the oak was gone. But life, in a new and unexpected form, was already present. Our job was not to cling to the form of the oak, but to tend to the life that was manifesting now. Our personal sorrows are like that shattered oak. Something familiar and cherished is gone. But in the raw, exposed space it leaves, if we do not fill it immediately with despair, we might notice the first green shoots of a new understanding, a new resilience, a new kind of life already beginning. This is why the Buddha placed such emphasis on clear seeing, or vipassana. It is the seeing of the three marks of existence: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and the not-self, anatta, nature of all phenomena. When you see clearly that everything is in flux, that clinging to flux brings suffering, and that there is no permanent, unchanging me at the center being victimized by it all, the entire drama of your personal suffering begins to unravel. You stop taking the weather personally. You are the sky, and the sky can hold any cloud, any storm, any radiant sunset, with equal spaciousness. We often speak of finding peace as if it were a treasure buried under difficult circumstances. We think, when this stress passes, then I will find peace. When I resolve that conflict, then peace will come. This frames peace as a future event, a reward for solving problems. Buddhism turns this view inside out. Peace is not the prize at the end of the struggle. Peace is the very ground on which the struggle takes place. It is not something to be found later, it is something to be recognized now, beneath the noise of your trying. Imagine you are in a room where a film is projected on the wall. The film is dramatic, full of conflict, joy, and sorrow. You become absorbed in the story, your heart racing, your emotions engaged. Now, imagine you remember you are in a room. You notice the projector humming in the back. You feel the solid floor beneath your feet. The film continues to play, but now you are also aware of the stable, silent room that contains it. Your relationship to the drama changes. You are still watching, but you are no longer lost in it. The peace of the room was always there, it was just overshadowed by the compelling images on the wall. Your life is that film. Your awareness is the room. The practice is the remembering. The gentle turning of attention from the storyline to the space that holds it. This space is not a void. It is a vibrant, intelligent presence. It is the capacity to know, to feel, to be aware. We overlook it because it doesn't have a dramatic quality. It doesn't shout. It simply is. Like the screen upon which the movie plays, it receives all images without being stained by them. A tragic scene does not damage the screen. A joyful scene does not improve it. The screen remains neutral, allowing, present. Your true nature is more like that screen than like the ever-changing images of thought and emotion. Suffering is becoming so identified with the tragic scene that you believe the screen itself is in tatters. I witnessed a beautiful example of this with a potter at her wheel. She was centering a large lump of clay, but it was stubborn, wobbling violently. Her hands were covered in slurry, her brow furrowed with effort. She pushed and pulled, but the clay seemed to fight her. I expected her to grow frustrated. Instead, she stopped. She sat back, closed her eyes, and took 3 long, slow breaths. She wasn't calming the clay, she was refinding her own center. Then she leaned forward again, placed her hands on the clay with a different quality, firm but yielding, present but not forcing. Within moments, the wobble ceased. The clay spun into a perfect, humming circle on the wheel. The shift wasn't in the clay. It was in her. She stopped trying to force peace onto the clay and instead returned to the peace within herself, from which skillful action could naturally flow. Our minds are that clay, often wobbly and off-center. Our compulsive thinking and fixing are the frantic, forceful hands. The peace we seek is the centered, quiet presence from which we can meet the wobble without adding to the chaos. This points to a profound Buddhist principle, right view, or samadhi. It is the understanding that our actions and states of mind have causes and consequences. The wobble of anxiety has causes, perhaps fatigue, uncertainty, or remembered thought. The frantic pushing has a consequence, more wobble, more exhaustion. Right view sees this chain. It then informs right effort, not the effort to suppress the wobble, but the effort to cultivate the causes of centeredness. To pause. To breathe. To re-establish the ground of awareness. The effort shifts from manipulating the content of your experience to stabilizing the context. We are like someone trying to quiet a turbulent pond by slapping at the water. Our efforts to fix our anxiety or sadness are often just more slapping, more agitation. The Buddhist path suggests a different method: simply stop agitating. Be still. Allow the mud to settle on its own. In that settling, the water becomes clear, and you can see the bottom. The answers, the clarity, the next step often become visible not through frantic searching, but through patient allowing. This is not inaction. It is the most potent form of action, creating the conditions for wisdom to arise. Let me share a story from a long walk I once took. I had set out to reach a certain mountain lake by noon. The trail was steep, and I was pushing myself, checking my watch, calculating my pace. I was not on the trail, I was in the future, at the lake. My breath was labored, my muscles ached, and I felt only strain. Then, the strap on my pack broke. I had to stop. Irritated, I sat on a rock to fix it. As I fumbled with the buckle, forced into the present moment, I heard the stream I'd been hurrying past. I felt the cool air. I saw the intricate pattern of lichen on the rock beside me. By the time I repaired the strap, my urgency had dissolved. I continued the walk, but now I was walking. I felt the earth under my boots. I saw the light through the trees. I arrived at the lake much later than planned, but I arrived fully there, not exhausted and future-focused, but peaceful and present. The broken strap was not an obstacle to my peace, it was the mechanism that returned me to it. The obstacles in your life, the interruptions, the disappointments, the broken straps, are often similar invitations. They force a stop. And in that stop, if you do not fill it immediately with frustration, you may find the peace that was chasing you all along. This is the subtle art of yielding. We value force, willpower, pushing through. But the deepest strength is often like the strength of water. Water does not argue with the rock, it flows around it. It does not resist the riverbank, it is shaped by it, and in time, it shapes the bank in return. It is both yielding and powerful. Your peaceful awareness can be like that. You do not need to argue with reality to be effective in it. You can yield to what is, acknowledge the rock of a difficult emotion, and in that very yielding, find the path of flow around it. Your energy is no longer wasted in resistance. It is freed for clear, compassionate action. Consider the weight of a label. We take a fluid, fleeting experience and we name it, we categorize it, we give it a solid identity. This is depression. This is my anxiety. This is my trauma. In doing so, we build a small, hard shell around a passing cloud of sensations, thoughts, and energies. We then mistake the shell for the truth of what's inside, and we carry the shell with us long after the internal weather has changed. Buddhism encourages us to touch experience directly, before the label is applied. To feel the raw sensation of tightness, the flutter, the heaviness, the heat, without immediately calling it fear or grief. In the space before the word, there is often more freedom, more mystery, and less suffering. There is an exercise sometimes called bare attention. You listen to a sound, the wind, a distant car, a bird, and you try to hear it purely as vibration, as pattern, without naming it wind or car or bird. You simply receive the sensory impression. It's surprisingly difficult, and surprisingly liberating. It returns you to the pristine suchness of the world, before the mind's cataloging function takes over. You can do this with inner experience as well. A feeling arises. Can you feel it as pure sensation, without the story of why it's here or what it means about you? In that direct contact, the feeling often loses its personal, oppressive weight. It becomes a fascinating phenomenon, a play of energy in the field of awareness. I learned about the tyranny of labels not from a scripture, but from a master weaver. She worked with threads of impossible fineness, creating tapestries that looked like paintings. I once made the mistake of praising a section of her work by saying, "This part is so sad and beautiful," pointing to deep blues and grays. She paused her shuttle and looked at me. "The thread is not sad," she said gently. "The blue is not sorrowful. The arrangement, to your mind, evokes that feeling. But if I change the thread next to it?" She took a single golden thread and laid it lightly over the blue. "Now, what do you see?" The entire feeling of the section shifted. It became dawn over water, not twilight. "You see," she said, "the feeling is not in the thread. It is in the relationship, in the context. And the context can always change. Our labeled emotions are like that isolated blue patch. We believe the sadness is an intrinsic property of our being, a fixed thread in our tapestry. But it is always in relationship to other threads, our thoughts, our physical state, our surroundings. Change the relationship, not by force, but by introducing the golden thread of compassionate attention, and the whole pattern, the whole feeling, can transform. This leads us to another cornerstone, the teaching of anatta, or not self. This is often deeply misunderstood. It does not mean you don't exist. It means that what you habitually call me, or self, this solid, separate, enduring entity, is a construct. It is a collection of ever-changing processes, physical form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Like a chariot is not a thing in itself but a name for an assembly of wheels, axle, carriage, and reins, what we call I is a convenient designation for a flowing aggregate of parts. The suffering comes when we grasp one part, a painful feeling, a critical thought, and say, this is me. This is mine. This defines me. We take a wave in the ocean and declare it to be a separate, permanent entity called my bad wave, and then we suffer because our wave is not as calm as the others. Understanding anatta is the ultimate relief. It means you are not the owner of your anxiety. Anxiety is a temporary condition arising due to causes. You are not the failure behind your mistake. The mistake was an event in the chain of cause and effect. This depersonalization is not cold, it is the deepest form of compassion. It stops the endless, exhausting project of defending, improving, and solidifying a self that is, by nature, fluid and interdependent. You begin to relax into being a process, a happening, a verb rather than a noun. A river, not a statue. Let me tell you about an old bridge near the temple. It was made of rope and wood, and it swayed alarmingly when you crossed it. First-timers would freeze, gripping the ropes, trying to become as still as possible, fighting every swing. They would cross pale and tense. The villagers, however, crossed with ease, almost a dance. I asked one how they did it. You must not fight the swing, he said. You must move with it. The bridge is alive. You are not crossing a solid thing, you are having a conversation with the wind and the river below. Your job is not to be still, but to find your balance within the movement. Life is that bridge. Our instinct is to freeze, to grip, to try to impose solidity on a process that is inherently dynamic. The teaching of not self is an invitation to find your balance within the sway, to participate in the conversation. The anxiety, the joy, the boredom, these are not flaws in you, the static being. They are part of the dynamic sway of the living bridge of your experience. When you stop trying to be rigid, you find the flexibility that allows you to cross with grace. This is why the Buddha's path is one of investigation, not belief. He did not say, believe you have no self. He said, see for yourself. Look closely at your experience. Is there any single element, your body, your thoughts, your memories, that is permanent, entirely under your control, and exclusively yours, in a way that is separate from the rest of life? This inquiry, done with honest curiosity, begins to loosen the tight knot of self-identification. You start to experience moments where you are simply awareness, witnessing the coming and going of phenomena, without a central owner claiming them. In those moments, there is an incredible lightness. The burden of selfhood dissolves. You are just here. Alive. Aware. Part of the flowing whole. We often approach our inner world as a problem to be solved, a wilderness to be tamed and cultivated. We bring in the heavy machinery of analysis, the fences of discipline, the pesticides of positive thinking, trying to create a neat, productive, and pleasant garden. We wage war on weeds of undesirable thought and try to propagate only the flowers of happiness. This effort is endless, and the wilderness always creeps back in. Buddhism suggests a different relationship. Not that of a gardener to a plot of land, but that of a naturalist to a vast, ancient forest. The naturalist does not seek to change the forest. She walks through it with reverence, curiosity, and a deep understanding of its interconnected ecology. She knows that the decaying log is as vital as the soaring tree, that the predator has its place alongside the prey. Her peace comes from understanding the whole system, not from favoring one part over another. Your mind is that forest. It contains sunlight and shadow, growth and decay, quiet glades and tangled thickets. The thought, "I should only have peaceful, happy thoughts," is like a naturalist declaring, "This forest should only have daisies and songbirds." It is a fundamental misunderstanding of the ecosystem. The weeds of worry, the thorns of anger, the decay of sadness, they are not mistakes. They are part of the intelligence of the whole. They have a function. Worry alerts you to potential danger. Anger can signal a violated boundary. Sadness honors what has been lost. When you try to eradicate them, you disrupt the balance. The practice is to become the naturalist of your own inner wilderness. To observe the worry without becoming its prisoner. To feel the anger without being burned by its fire. To sit with the sadness without drowning in its waters. In this observing, you are no longer at war with your own nature. You are in relationship with it. I remember a seasoned beekeeper who lived down the mountain. His calm around the hives was profound. I asked him if he was never afraid of being stung. The fear, he said, is in the sudden, jerky movement. The fear is in wanting them to be something they are not, docile, stingless. When you move with respect, when you understand their nature, you work with them. The sting is part of the bee. It is not personal. My job is not to make the hive safe for me. My job is to make my presence understandable to the hive. He would move with a slow, deliberate grace, his attention fully on the living hum around him. He was not separate from the bees, he was a careful, respectful part of their world for a time. Our difficult emotions are like those bees. They have a sting. They can swarm. Our instinct is to swat, to run, to seal up the hive. But that only guarantees we get stung. The alternative is the beekeeper's way. Move slowly, breathe, respect the intelligence of the system, understand that the sting is not an attack but a defense. When you approach your anxiety with that quality of slow, respectful attention, it often ceases to swarm. It may still buzz, but it no longer threatens to overwhelm. This brings us to a pivotal mental shift, from control to influence. We crave control because we believe it will bring safety. We want to control our emotions, our circumstances, other people's opinions. But life is fundamentally uncontrollable. The more we grasp for control, the more we feel its absence, and the more we suffer. Influence, however, is always available. You cannot control the storm, but you can influence your preparedness and your response. You cannot control a rising feeling of panic, but you can influence your relationship to it. You can breathe, you can ground your feet, you can say, "This is a storm in the body-mind." Control is a closed fist. Influence is an open hand, feeling the wind, knowing when to steady yourself and when to simply feel the breeze. The Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path is a path of wise influence, not ultimate control. Right speech, right action, right livelihood, these are ways of influencing our external world with integrity. Right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, these are ways of influencing our inner world with skill. The path doesn't promise you will never feel pain or loss. It promises that you can influence how you meet that pain, so that it does not curdle into persistent suffering. Let me share an anecdote from learning to navigate by the stars. I was with a guide in a vast, trackless desert. On the first night, he pointed out constellations. I tried to memorize their positions rigidly. The next night, clouds covered most of the sky. I was anxious, feeling lost. The guide, however, seemed unperturbed. He pointed to a tiny patch of clear sky where just 2 stars were visible. "You don't need to see the whole picture," he said. "You just need to know your relationship to the 1 or 2 points you can see. From that, you can find your way." He showed me how, from those 2 known stars, he could infer the position of the hidden ones and thus our direction. Our inner life is often like that clouded sky. We want the full, clear map of why I feel this way, and exactly what to do. When we can't see it, we panic. The practice is to find the 1 or 2 points of clarity you do have in this moment. I am breathing. My feet are on the ground. There is a feeling of tightness in my chest. From these simple, undeniable points of present moment awareness, you can orient yourself. You don't need to see the end of the journey. You just need to know your true direction from where you are right now. That direction is always toward clarity, kindness, and acceptance, not away from discomfort. When you move in that true direction, step by step, the clouds eventually part, not because you fought them, but because you kept walking wisely in the clarity you had. This is the essence of trust. Not blind faith in a positive outcome, but a deep trust in your own capacity to meet whatever arises with the resources of the present moment. You trust the next breath. You trust the awareness that can hold a feeling. You trust that just as you have navigated every previous moment of your life, you will navigate this one. This trust is the antidote to the frantic grasping for control. It allows you to put down the heavy burden of being the manager of the universe and simply be a conscious, responsive participant in the flow of your own life. There is a deep, often unnoticed, form of exhaustion that has nothing to do with physical labor. It is the exhaustion of pretense. The effort required to maintain a facade, to project an image of how we think we should be, calm, successful, happy, unshaken. We perform this not only for others but for ourselves, trying to convince our own mind that we are the person we believe we ought to be. This performance is a constant low-grade drain on our vital energy. Buddhism invites us to a radical honesty, the courage to be exactly what you are in this moment, without embellishment or apology. Not as a permanent identity, but as a truthful acknowledgement of the present condition. This is not indulgence in negativity, it is the end of the civil war between what is and what you think should be. Imagine you are wearing a heavy, elaborate mask. It is beautiful perhaps, admired by others, but it is not your face. Underneath, your skin longs for air. Your true expressions are stifled. The weight of the mask gives you a constant ache in your neck and shoulders. Much of our suffering is this ache of wearing a mask, the mask of the fine person, the spiritual person, the strong person. The relief comes not from crafting a better mask, but from the daring act of setting it down, even if only in the privacy of your own awareness. To say, silently, right now, I am afraid. Right now, I am tired. Right now, I am confused. In that admission, the energy spent holding the mask in place is freed. That energy becomes available for healing, for rest, for genuine connection. I witnessed this powerfully in a master calligrapher. He was famed for his perfect, graceful characters. Students would strive for years to imitate his flawless lines. One day, a student presented a piece that was technically perfect but lifeless. The master looked at it, then took a brush, deliberately loaded it with too much ink, and with a seemingly wild gesture, slashed a single, dark, imperfect stroke across a fresh sheet of paper. It was bold, messy, and utterly alive. You seek perfection of form, he said, and in doing so, you kill the spirit. The life is in the willingness to include the uncontrolled stroke. The truth of the brush, the truth of your arm in this moment, is more important than an ideal of beauty. Our emotional perfectionism is like that student's perfect, dead characters. We try to edit out the messy strokes of sadness, anger, or fear. In doing so, we create a technically correct but lifeless inner experience. The aliveness, the authenticity, is in the willingness to let the true stroke, however messy, be made. To let the feeling be felt, in its authentic, unvarnished form. This is the integration that brings wholeness. This practice of radical honesty aligns with the Buddhist concept of sati, or mindfulness, which includes remembering to see things as they actually are, not as we wish them to be. It is a returning, again and again, to the raw data of present experience, before the mind spins it into a story of success or failure. When you are anxious, can you feel it as a cluster of physical sensations, before you tell the story, my presentation will fail, or I am inadequate? This direct contact is where transformation occurs. The story amplifies. The sensation, when fully allowed, often dissipates. Consider the metaphor of the knot. A difficult emotion, when resisted, is like a knot in a piece of wood or a tangled cord. Our instinct is to pull on the ends, to force it, to tighten our grip, which only makes the knot smaller, harder, and more entrenched. The wise approach is first to stop pulling. To relax your grip. To observe the knot's structure. To gently loosen it from the sides, creating slack. You work with the knot's nature, not against it. Your anxious mind is a knot of thoughts, sensations, and stories. Trying to relax, by force is often just another form of pulling. True loosening begins with cessation, stopping the struggle. Then, with the gentle, inquisitive attention of mindfulness, you create space around the strands of the knot. You see the thought as just a thought, the sensation as just a sensation. In that space, the knot begins, of its own accord, to loosen. The emotion untangles itself when it is no longer tightened by your resistance. I learned this not from a spiritual teacher, but from an old sailor mending nets. His hands moved with a fluid, unhurried precision through the horrific tangles left by a storm. I asked him the secret. There is no knot that patience and respect cannot undo, he said. If you fight it, if you curse it, you become part of the tangle. Your anger becomes another strand in the net. But if you welcome the knot, if you see it as simply the current state of the net, your mind stays clear. Your fingers find the way. Our inner work is net mending. The storms of life will always tangle our inner nets. The skill is not in preventing tangles, but in knowing how to sit with the tangled mess without adding our frustration to it, and then applying a patient, respectful attention until the way through reveals itself. This points to the quality of upekkha, or equanimity. Equanimity is not bland neutrality. It is a balanced, spacious heart. It is the capacity to be with pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, without being swept away into clinging or aversion. It is the sailor's calm hands working the net in all weathers. It is the understanding that all experiences share the same nature, they arise, they linger, they pass away. From this vantage point, you can engage fully with life. You can enjoy success, grieve loss, work for change, but you do so from a center that is not rocked by the changing tides. Your happiness is no longer a fragile boat tossed on the ocean, it becomes the stability of the ocean floor, which remains, profoundly still, beneath all surface movement. Let's speak of endings, or rather, the illusion of them. We perceive our life as a series of discrete events with clear beginnings and endings. A relationship ends, a job concludes, a chapter closes. We speak of getting over things, of closure. This linear view is a source of immense anguish because it sets us up for a futile quest, the search for a finishing point to pain, a moment when the past is neatly packed away and no longer affects us. Buddhism, with its understanding of interdependence and constant flux, offers a more fluid, compassionate perspective. Nothing truly ends, it transforms. The pain does not vanish, it metabolizes. The memory does not disappear. It integrates into the tapestry of who you are becoming. The goal is not an end, but a harmonious relationship with what was, and what is. Think of a stone dropped into a still pond. The splash is the event, the loss, the shock, the acute pain. The ripples expand outward, gradually growing wider and fainter. We mistake the fading of the ripples for the end of the event. But the stone remains on the bottom. The water has been permanently displaced. The pond is forever different because of the stone. This is not a tragedy, it is simply the nature of cause and effect. Your task is not to pretend the stone was never dropped, or to feverishly smooth the water until it looks like it once did. Your task is to learn to live lovingly with the new contours of the pond, to notice how the light reflects differently now off the stone below the surface, to accept that this body of water holds that history within its depths. Healing is not the erasure of the stone, it is the pond's gradual, peaceful accommodation of it. I accompanied a friend to scatter the ashes of a loved one in a forest river. She was braced for a final, devastating goodbye. As she let the ashes go, they did not vanish. They swirled in the current, some catching on roots at the bank, some sinking, some floating onward out of sight. She stood there, watching, and her tense grief slowly softened into something more like wonder. "He's not gone," she said quietly. "He's in the roots now. And the water going downstream. And the soil." Her need for a sharp, clean ending dissolved into a recognition of transformation. She stopped trying to end her grief and began a new relationship with a presence that had changed form. Our smaller losses, of a dream, an identity, a hope, ask for the same understanding. We don't get over them. We learn to carry them differently. They become part of the ecosystem of our being, no longer a foreign block of pain, but a nutrient for a deeper, more resilient kind of life. This is intimately connected to the teaching of Paticcasamuppada, dependent origination. It is the profound truth that all phenomena arise in dependence upon causes and conditions. Your sadness today did not appear from nowhere. It is the result of a million causes. Your biology, the weather, a forgotten memory, a word spoken years ago, the state of the world. Seeing this unravels the tight knot of personal blame. Why is this happening to me? Becomes, what are the conditions giving rise to this experience? This shift is not about avoiding responsibility, it's about responding from clarity instead of shame. When you see your anger as the result of fatigue, hunger, and a perceived slight, rather than as proof of your bad character, you can address the conditions, rest, eat, communicate, rather than wage war on yourself. The emotion ceases to be a verdict and becomes information about the interconnected web of life in this moment. Let me share a story about a broken bowl. In the temple kitchen, a beloved, century-old rice bowl slipped from a shelf and shattered. The monk who had dropped it was distraught. The elder cook, however, gathered the pieces carefully. He didn't throw them away. Over the next weeks, he used an ancient technique called kintsugi, mending the bowl with a lacquer mixed with gold dust. When he was done, the bowl was whole again, but its cracks were illuminated with delicate, gleaming veins of gold. It was more beautiful, more valued, and certainly more unique than it had been before. He presented it to the young monk and said, "The breakage is now part of its history, and its beauty. Do not hide it. Let it shine." Our breaks, our fractures of heart and spirit, are like that. The goal of the path is not to become a bowl that never cracks, that is impossible in this world of contact and change. The goal is to develop the golden lacquer of compassionate awareness, so that when we inevitably break, we can mend ourselves with a wisdom that makes our scars not something to hide, but a testament to our capacity to hold our own brokenness with love. Your cracks are where the light of your understanding can now shine through. This mending leads to a quality of deep resilience that is not hard, but supple. It is the resilience of bamboo, which bends violently in the typhoon but does not break, because it is hollow and rooted. It is the resilience of your own breath, which has continued, without your conscious command, through every experience of your life, adapting to exertion, rest, laughter, and tears. You already have this resilience. It is the nature of life itself, flowing through you. Trusting in this is the essence of faith on the Buddhist path. Not faith in a doctrine, but faith in the fundamental thusness of life, its capacity to continue, to transform, to find a way. You are not a fragile statue awaiting the next blow. You are a living process, as resilient and adaptable as water, as enduring as space. So we arrive here, not at a destination, but at a recognition. The chase we began, the frantic, lifelong pursuit of a feeling called happiness, has quieted not because we captured our prize, but because we turned and saw the nature of the chase itself. We saw that it was fueled by a misunderstanding, the belief that peace lies in the future, contingent on conditions. The Buddha's great gift was to point out that peace is not a condition. It is the very nature of a mind that is no longer at war with what is. It is the silent, spacious background that has been present all along, beneath the noise of craving and aversion. Imagine you have been listening to a complex symphony. Your attention has been leaping from one instrument to another, following the melody of the violins, bracing for the crash of the cymbals, feeling swept away by the swell of the cellos. You have been lost in the drama of the individual notes. Then, for a moment, your awareness expands. You stop following the parts and you hear the whole. The silence between the notes becomes as present as the sound. The space that holds the symphony becomes palpable. You are no longer just in the music, you are also in the vast concert hall of awareness that contains it. This is the shift. Your life is the symphony, beautiful, tragic, chaotic, sublime. Your suffering was being lost in the individual notes, clinging to the pleasant ones, resisting the discordant ones. Your peace is found in remembering that you are also the listening space, the silent awareness that can hear it all without being shattered by any of it. This is not a passive state. It is the most profound kind of engagement. When you know you are the listening space, you can appreciate the music more fully, precisely because you are no longer afraid of it ending or desperate for it to continue. You are free to be moved, to be touched, to be alive to all of it. Let me leave you with one final, simple story. Every evening at the temple, a bell is rung. Its sound is clear, deep, and resonant. It vibrates through the stone walls and the still air. When I first arrived, I would listen for the bell. My mind would anticipate the strike, then grasp at the sound, trying to hold on to its purity as it faded. In my effort to have the sound, I missed most of it. One evening, the monk who rings the bell saw my tense listening. He said nothing. The next night, he handed me the mallet. "You ring it," he said. I struck the bell. The sound erupted, a physical wave in the air. And then, without thinking, I did the only thing one can do, I stopped. I became still. I didn't try to listen, I was simply available to the sound as it bloomed, filled the courtyard, and gradually, gracefully, dissolved back into silence. In that dissolution, there was no loss. There was a completion. The sound wasn't gone, it had become part of the quiet. The quiet afterward was not empty, it was rich with the memory of the bell. In that moment, I understood. I had been trying to hold the ringing. But the beauty was in the whole process, the strike, the resonance, the fading, the silence, and my whole, undivided presence with it. Your life is that bell. You cannot hold on to the ring of joy. You cannot prevent the strike of sorrow. But you can learn to be the still, open space that allows the full resonance of each experience. You can meet the strike without flinching, welcome the resonance without clinging, and rest in the silence that follows without fear. In that openness, the chase truly ends. There is nowhere to go, nothing to acquire, no feeling to cling to. There is only this, the ever-unfolding experience of being alive, met with a clear, compassionate, and steady attention. The Buddha's path does not end in a heaven of perpetual happiness. It ends in a simple, profound homecoming. It ends with you, here, in this body, in this breath, in this moment, no longer a seeker, but a finder of what was never lost. The peace you sought was not ahead of you on the path. It was the ground beneath your feet all along. The happiness you chased was not a reward. It was the natural warmth of a heart no longer clenched in fear. So tonight, as you rest, let this be your practice. Not a striving, but a yielding. Not a fixing, but an allowing. Feel the weight of your body. Hear the sounds around you. Notice the flow of your breath. And in the center of it all, sense the presence that is aware of all this. That awareness is your true home. It is silent, spacious, and utterly at peace. It has room for joy. It has room for sadness. It has room for you, exactly as you are, in this perfect, unfinished, beautiful moment. Welcome home.